Greetings, and thank you for joining us for another SANS ICS Concept Overview. I'm Don C. Weber of Cutaway Security and a certified SANS instructor. In this concept overview, we're joined by Vitas Butrimas from the Nato Energy Security Center of Excellence and ISA 99 Working Group 13, where he is the co-chair. Vitas and I talk about his experiences in information security and the reports his teams have published. If you enjoy this video and topics we cover in the SANS ICS Concept Overviews, be sure to like and subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment if you have a question about this topic or suggestions for future content. Hello. Today for this installment of the SANS ICS Concept videos, we are joined by Vitas Butrimas. I met Vitas during my introduction to the ICS 99 Working Group 13 and interacted with him in his role as co-chair. So he co-chairs that, and I sit in, basically right now I just sit in on meetings. So it's really good to see him face to face here. I actually knew that I wanted to bring him on to the concept to talk about some of his research paper and some of the things that he's doing out in Europe, some of the efforts for researching industrial control environments. So Vitas, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit better?
Yes, my name is Vitas Butrimas. Thank you very much for having me here. I've been working in IT security and defense policy for about 30 years. I'm currently stationed at the NATO Energy Security Center of Excellence. And if we can, I'd like to talk a little bit, a few words about the work of the center.
We should see your slide now.
Oh, thank you very much.
There we go.
Well, what do we do at the NATO Energy Security Center of Excellence? We support NATO, nations, and partners to meet the challenges of a dynamic energy security environment by addressing resilience, energy efficiency, and critical energy infrastructure protection. We do it in various ways. We conduct exercises and we give courses on energy security. We have these tabletop exercises that we did last fall on power synchronization in the Baltic states, and we did one on hybrid threats to natural gas and critical energy infrastructure. We do studies and collaborations with other organizations. There you see I performed a cyber risk evaluation of the NATO Central European pipeline system. This was not just pure research in the office, but I actually visited national pipeline operators in 4 countries, spent time with the plant engineers, and I came up with some nice recommendations on how they can make their pipeline operations safer and more reliable and resilient than they are now. We also have a publications arm. We publish a journal on energy security called Operational Highlights. And there's one feature issue I authored a study, Hybrid Warfare Against Critical Energy Infrastructure, the case of Ukraine. And in 2015, and 2017, after the 2 cyber attacks on the power grids in Ukraine and also the NotPetya in 2017, we came down as a team and we give a week-long course together with the NATO postgraduate school in Monterey, courses and a tabletop exercise. We associate ourselves with a variety of organizations, the International Society of Automation, which Don mentioned. I'm also a member of the Science and Technology Organization of NATO, contributing to a project study on hybrid warfare and energy security. And we also cooperate with other organizations, European Union, the Joint Research Center. So that's just a few words. There's the website, ENSEC.COE.org, and you can find out more about the work we do. Thank you.
Oh,
you can continue.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And, this is y'all have been putting out some pretty interesting research. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing real quick and get back to us. So excellent research in being put out, especially from the European standpoint. I mean, it's not focused on European standards, or at least not the ones that I read, but certainly taking into consideration a lot of different things. One of the things that kind of popped out at me was your paper on the assessment of smart grid technologies in operational camps. And, that was your paper from last year or towards the end of last year. Can you talk a little bit about that and kind of what the research was?
That study was performed at the request of the French military, the general staff. They're thinking about smart grid solutions for their mobile military camps. But I found out that the US, Canada, Germany, not just France, they have in Netherlands are doing research work in this area, and it's for a good purpose. With the experiences in Afghanistan and Iraq, you had a supply issue for providing fuel to the forces out there in harm's way. And when they set up a camp, you have to set up convoys to provide diesel fuel to run the generators. You have to set it through hostile territory. So the idea was, if you can use some of the renewable technologies, a combination of a solar, wind, and battery storage, and diesel-powered generators, that you can perhaps produce some of your own energy, use less diesel, and have fewer of these truck convoys. So I looked into this, and one of the things that I noted is all these prototype systems were up and running. They're being experimented on. They're being in big bases, small bases in the U.S. and other countries, but nothing about security. Nothing about cybersecurity and the design of these systems, and nothing to protect them against what we know in the office enterprise world for the last 20 years, the threats from cyberspace into these systems. So I made some recommendations on how they can put some of security design right in the beginning of the design process, and not just sort of clamp it on at the very end where it's going to be harder to do and more expensive.
My experience around that is that the vendors and the integrators that are being brought in, they're experienced in that the implementation of those technologies. They know how to run them. They know the technologies that are needed to keep them operational, and they deploy them in that manner. However, there are, as we both know, there's considerations for different types of security. In your research, if you had to tell people, the best approach for addressing those security issues, some of it at the beginning, and then some of it if it's already deployed, what were your recommendations that came out of the report?
Well, across the board in most of my work, I put in a set of recommendations, but what's common to all of them is when you're talking about industrial cybersecurity, where you're talking about the technologies that monitor and control physical processes governed by the laws of physics and chemistry, don't forget to invite the engineers. They are the ones that know how things run. They know about the physical process. And if you bring in IT bias into this work, you're going to get into a lot of trouble. I recently spoke at a meeting of the Council of the European Energy Regulators in Europe, and they're providing comments to a European Union document on the code for energy network security. And I said, I'm sorry, but this is an IT document. There's nothing here that addresses process control. And they asked me, can you make comments to this? We'll pass it along. I said, sure. I made 92 comments. And I also said, invite the engineers. Mm-hmm. Include language that addresses industrial automation and control systems. I mentioned standards, 62443, which is an international standard. It's all over the world. It's been recognized by the United Nations now. So that, and there's other standards that are relevant to electric power, energy distribution, and so forth. So invite the engineers. These regulators are like lawyers, bureaucrats, and they basically think, well, I know the IT that's on my desk, the computer and the smartphone is what they do in the industrial sector. They use computers. It's the same thing. No, it isn't. And you got to invite the engineer to provide that missing gap of knowledge and imagination to make your regulation or your standard applicable and useful, and will improve the safety. So you don't have to call fire and rescue to help you out if you have a mishap in a physical process.
So one of the things that, while I was reading the paper, I was trying to think of how it would apply to other areas. And, I think of FEMA in the United States, which is emergency response. They're going to have mobile camps. As soon as I thought of that, I started thinking about refugee camps around the world, and the potential for targeting around that. Do you think that this paper and the findings would apply to those areas as well?
Yes, I think so, because you're talking about disaster response. You're talking about a microgrid, kind of a independent island where you can produce and store and distribute your own power, to your limited area. So it's very applicable, and it it even goes beyond that. You also want to have a connection with the national grid, because you can sort of exchange power with each other under certain circumstances. Military is starting to use electric vehicles, and you can actually share power from the vehicle in times of emergencies and so forth. Very interesting article I heard about Australia this week. The Telstra is their it's a power telecommunications company in Australia. They're building GSM towers, communication mobile GSM towers that are powered by renewable technologies, and it's basically a response to disasters, because when your landlines, your telephone poles with the power cables go down, you don't want your communications sources for power to go down. So now they're setting up these islands and just solar, making 12 kilowatt hours of electricity from solar and wind to power the GSM tower. So if there's a failure of the main line, you have a backup system that'll keep up your emergency communications. And emergency communications is really important. You might not think of it as a target, but I have a colleague, which we both know, who told me about, he was one of the authors of the 911, 112 emergency systems in London and Chicago and other places. And he says, don't you even consider that is not a target. That emergency system is not a target for an adversary. If they want to plan something to do harm to you, they want to mess up your ability to respond, your FEMA and so forth, the command and control communications, they want to go after that. So these smart grid ideas it's also applicable for disaster relief, not just for refugees, but keep the society going, recover faster, restore those vital services as soon as possible using these backup power sources.
Absolutely. When I was doing my smart meter research, like 10 years ago, and I was driving around looking for instances of things that would be interesting. And one of the things I saw was the smart meters actually on the cell towers. And even though I did a bunch of research in this area, I talked about all of the things that I was capable of doing. As soon as I showed pictures of the cell towers and I started talking about first responders, that's when everybody sat up, because they hadn't, they think about the smart meter on the side of the house and the side of the business. And that is, certainly a risk, especially if you have a large number of them. Mm-hmm. But as soon as I pointed out the cell tower, that's when people got really interested. So we've talked about, you've mentioned ISA 99 a little bit. I mentioned it at the start. So can you talk to me about what the ISA 99 Working Group 13 is that you co-chair?
Yes, thank you. I co-chair it with Mr. Gary Rathwell, a longtime experienced engineer in the organization. And it was basically his idea. They have this big, huge standard, the ISA IEC 62443 Industrial Automation and Control System Security Standard. It's hundreds of pages. How do you start? Where do you, dig into this? Mm-hmm. And one way that he thought would help, to introduce this to people, to engineers and to people who are going to be working with the standard or are interested in finding more about it, is to set up a micro learning module about various aspects of the standard. And what the word micro means, 10 to 15 minutes of like a PowerPoint presentation with the author's audio possibly a video recorded to explain some sort of concept. And I was very quick, got some enthusiastic response. I did a 3-part series on industrial cybersecurity for the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer for an enterprise, just to give him or her an idea, again, what goes on outside of the office IT server room, billing and accounting department, but what knowledge is required to actually be in charge of an enterprise where you have power generation, petrochemical plants, and so forth. It came from a newly appointed CISO for a oil refinery that came to me and said, "Mr. Butrimas, I have these degrees in computer science, but I can't talk to my engineers. Can you help me?" So, basically that's where the MLM, came out of there. And I cover questions like when I visited an industrial site for the last 10, 12 years. And I asked them also, what is your patching policy? And they kind of I get these funny looks, and they say, we consider patching an unacceptable industrial risk. And the MLM explains a little bit why they say that. And it was a shock to me as an IT guy to hear that. But now I understand, after working with them, spending time with the engineers, watching them work, why that's so. But they got to get together now, the IT, the CISO, and the engineers, to say, there's stuff going on in cyberspace, you ought to know about it. Okay, and the engineer says, okay, but I want to make sure I'm responsible for the safety of this operation, that none of these IT policies will interfere. Okay, we'll sit down, have a coffee and a donut, and we'll discuss how we can do this safely and improve the overall safety of the enterprise and the reliability and resilience. So that's what these MLMs are. We also do some case studies. There are some. I did a couple of MLMs on the 2 Ukraine attacks on the power grid on December 23rd of 2015, and the much more interesting one that happened in the city of Kiev a year later. And then about the some of the water utility incidents that we've had. I did some case study, and I try to bring it back to the ISA 62443, saying this is where it could have helped if this was applied. So, and then there's, as we're a big group, and they're all writing these MLMs, even more specific to the standard itself, and we hope that we can start distributing it to the ISA membership and even to the public at large to help them, learn about these difficult concepts, and so can make all of our work better.
Yeah, and I enjoy working the group. I especially I was pleasant. I figured this would kind of happen, but it was a pleasant surprise to find out when I started listening in on some of the ISA 99 conversations. The OT representation, the control network representation there is definitely valid. There's a lot of people with that experience. They understand this is a concern, and they're contributing to all of these efforts. So I really enjoyed that, and like listening to them when they start talking about their concerns associated with some of the IT recommendations or moving forward. Every area that I've gone into within control networks, and when I start working with the operators and the engineers, what standards is this associated with? And it's a big deal to them, because they build everything associated to standards because of those safety requirements, because of the operational requirements. And so it makes sense that they're tying it back to we have to tie some of our security requirements and recommendations back to standards that are outlined by international professionals. So yeah, so I was pleasantly surprised about that. Is there anything else that your teams, your ICS teams, or your security research teams, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about, bring to light?
Well, again, we're talking about standards, we're talking about policies, we're talking about regulations. I really think we really need to answer 3 very, very important questions. This is questions that I came up with when I was the head of a task force to prepare Lithuania's first military defense strategy, 20, 21 years ago. 12 years ago for the Ministry of Defense's cybersecurity strategy, and then working on the National Task Force in 2015 for cybersecurity law drafting. And it really comes down, if you want to have an effective document, it really comes down to the three little pigs story. What do you want to protect, from what threats, and how to protect identified assets from identified threats. And I see a lot of this confusion about what IT is, what OT is, what is an industrial automation and control system. And the IT it tends to be very dominant. It's like the first two pigs, one's making out of the house out of straw and the other one out of sticks, to protect from the wind and the rain. The IT department, the billing and the accounting. But the third pig took account the possibility of an attack from the wolf on his industrial control systems, where the physical process is, where things can go boom in the night. And this is a very, very important issue. And I see this, all over the place. U.S. government documents, executive orders, the NIST. And whenever I read some of these documents, and I also for the International Energy Agency, I've made comments, and also NATO, European Union, and NIST, all these organizations, I ask myself those three questions. What is it that they're trying to protect in this document, and from what threats, and how are they going to do about it? And unfortunately, the what is a office IT. It's the the website, the email, the phishing. The server room, and the main threat is a cybercrime. The ransomware. Oh, that's a cybercrime. Ransomware, bad. Colonial Pipeline. It's bad. But if you think about the sinister part of the world, you can also some of these things that are called cybercrime, also are advanced persistent threat actors that are making things look like cybercrime. If you look at the NotPetya ransomware in 2017 that originated Ukraine was a target, and then it went to the Maersk shipping lines all over the world, paralyzed. It was ransomware, yeah, but the part that worked was the spreading, all over the world, and the encryption of the data of the hard drives. The part that didn't work was the payback option, where the victim could pay the money back. That tells me, this is like a pseudo criminal. It's more a state operation, and that's pretty much what everybody thinks now. So this is what I see as missing. I hate the word OT. I hate that word. That's more of an IT specialist word that he came up to describe what he thinks he sees on the industrial side. And it means anything. This past week in Europe, 3 countries, fuel distribution systems were attacked, apparently with ransomware. And they're saying, the OT was hit. And I'm reading, it's a press story. So it's even harder to figure out, what does he think or she think OT is? Mm-hmm. Did the control systems of these fuel supply systems, were they affected by the ransomware? I don't think so. What I think was, the billing and accounting and the IT department was affected by the ransomware, and maybe, out of caution, and it became like a disruptionware operation. That's a new term. Disruptionware is where you can attack the IT side of an operation, but force the shutdown of the industrial part, because of the IT and the industrial part are sort of interrelated. Too many connections, so you lose. They can't live without the other. But that's not a good thing. That's where we can bring up another topic about system architecture. System architectures, you should not have a failure of the IT side that causes a failure of the industrial side with the physical process. Thank God with the Colonial Pipeline, that the physical process, the control systems were intact. Why do I say that to myself? Because they were able to safely shut down an 8,000 kilometer long pipeline. If they lost the control of the valves and they were just let go, you would still be cleaning up the mess today. So that again is this OT. It means anything to anybody, but to me, I do just a general thing in my head. IT is like your billing and accounting for an enterprise. The OT is like where the control room is, where the SCADA lives, which is software. And the ICS, the industrial control system, that's where the physical process is. That's where the programmable logic controllers are. That's where the remote terminal units are. That's where the sensors are that have no security on them. If you break into the network, you can do anything with that sensor that you want, including interfere with its telemetry. So this is a very important distinction to make. And whenever we come up with a document, I read, gee, this is a good document. Engineers worked here, but from the same organization, it's kind of like a left brain, right brain situation. There are no engineers here, and it shows, and it's nonsense what they're trying to say about critical infrastructure protection.
Yeah, and how you just described the difference between IT, OT, and the industrial sensors and controllers and stuff like that. That's usually how I break it down, at least in my head, to help organize it, because we can't help what the public, the media are going to latch onto the different terms, but we do have to have professionals that can kind of filter through it and make it usable and clarify for certain individuals. I think it's really important. I think your research group and your work with the ISA 99 work group 13 is extremely valuable as we're going forward. And I really appreciate your time that you spent with us today. Before we leave, can you help people understand how to get in contact with you, whether it's through your research or whether it's through ISA 99 or you personally?
Yeah, first of all, everything I said is not the official view of NATO. I work for a NATO accredited institution, so just so I have my job tomorrow, I go. But contacting me, just do a Google search on Vitas Butrimas, Stuxnet. You'll see a lot of stuff come up, articles, YouTube videos of my lectures. But I think you can find me. Vitas.butrimas at ENSEC COE, one word, .org, and you can get an email to me. Or if you have trouble spelling, it's vito2be at hotmail.com. So vito2be as in VYTO number 2, 2B and at hotmail.com.
We'll have all of that in the show notes. I'll have
show notes. I'll send you some show notes.
Yeah, so definitely we'll have all that in the show notes. We'll have your research papers in there as well. I kind of piqued my interest, links to the ISA 99 work group and so forth. I really appreciate your time here today. Thank you very, very much. And you have a great week. Okay.
Okay. And see you at the next ISA work group 13 meeting, Don.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for tuning in to another concept overview with the SANS ICS and Cutaway security teams. Please let us know if there are other topics you would like us to cover in the comments below. If you enjoyed the content, please be sure to like and subscribe to the SANS ICS YouTube channel. This has been Don C. Weber of Cutaway Security. Go forth and do good things.